The first night at Windermere Cottage was quieter than Eliza Harcourt had imagined. The countryside, though beautiful, carried a silence so deep that even her own footsteps seemed too loud. She had arrived late, her suitcase heavy and her thoughts heavier still. The cottage sat on the edge of a silver lake, the water still and glassy under a pale moon. Across the water stood a house larger, older, and utterly dark. Its windows were black holes staring across the surface, and though Eliza tried not to look at them, she felt them watching her back. She lit the fireplace, boiled water for tea, and told herself she had come here to write, not to dwell on ghosts of the past. The publisher's deadline loomed, and her last book had failed miserably. This new one, she hoped, would restore her career. Yet the stillness of the place unsettled her. By midnight, she sat by the window with her notebook open but untouched. The ink in her pen refused to flow, as if the words themselves resisted being written. Her gaze drifted across the lake. A faint light flickered in the upper window of the dark house. At first, she thought it must be a reflection perhaps from a passing car, though the nearest road was miles away. But the light didn't fade. It moved. From one window to another. Her chest tightened. She remembered the estate agent's words earlier that day. Windermere Hall has been empty for years. Best not to ask too much about it. Still, curiosity gnawed at her. She watched the light glide across the windows, steady and slow, until it vanished behind the trees. For several moments, the darkness deepened, and the lake turned mirror still again. Then came a faint sound. A soft splash, as though something or someone had entered the water. Eliza held her breath, her fingers gripping the edge of the window frame. She could see nothing. The moonlight rippled gently across the lake, calm and unbroken. Finally, she closed the curtains and turned away, forcing herself to believe it was nothing. Just the wind, or the trick of the light. But when she looked again just once, before going to bed, the light in the window had returned. And this time, she was sure of it, there was someone standing there. The next morning brought a pale sun and the sound of gulls drifting over the lake. Eliza woke late, her head filled with restless dreams of water and whispers. She dressed quickly and stepped outside, hoping fresh air would clear her thoughts. Mist still lingered above the surface of the lake, thin and ghost-like. Across the water, Windermere Hall stood silent as a monument, its tall chimneys reaching into the cold sky. In daylight, it seemed harmless enough, just another relic of another age. Eliza almost laughed at herself. "You're imagining things," she thought. But when she turned towards the door, her smile froze. There, on the wooden step, were wet footprints. Bare footprints. Small, like those of a child. They led from the path by the lake straight to her door, and stopped there. She crouched down, touched one lightly. It was still damp. Later that day, she drove to the village to ask about the house. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Denby, gave her a look that was neither friendly nor cruel, just cautious. "You saw the hall, then?" "Yes," Eliza replied. "There was a light last night." "Is someone living there?" Mrs. Denby hesitated, her hands stilling over the counter. "No one's lived there since the Hardings. Terrible business, that was. Best not to stir old waters, dear. Lakes keep secrets." When Eliza pressed further, the woman only shook her head. That evening, rain returned. The sky darkened early, and wind whistled through the eaves of the cottage. Eliza sat at her desk, determined to work. She opened her notebook, and stopped cold. Across the first blank page were faint words, written in her own hand. "He is waiting." Her stomach turned. She flipped through the rest of the pages, empty, save for that single sentence. She tried to laugh it off, telling herself she must have written it half asleep. Yet she couldn't shake the chill in her bones. At midnight, she heard it again, the soft sound of water moving. She rose and looked through the window. The light across the lake had returned. But this time, it wasn't in the window. It was on the water. A small lantern drifted slowly toward her cottage, its flame steady in the wind. And as it came closer, she saw something, someone, holding it. Eliza pressed her hands against the cold windowpane, her breath fogging the glass. The small lantern floated closer, its golden glow trembling on the black surface of the lake. She could just make out the shape of a figure beneath a wide-brimmed hat, their reflection wavering like smoke. For a moment, she thought it might be a fisherman, someone lost or seeking shelter. But the hour was far too late, and the lake was far too still. The figure stopped midway across the water. The lantern lifted, as if in greeting, or warning. Then, without sound, the light went out. Darkness swallowed the lake. Eliza stumbled back, heart pounding. She fumbled for the cottage's oil lamp and turned up the wick, filling the room with trembling light. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the wind scratching at the door. She told herself she wouldn't look again, that it was nothing but a trick of the night. But curiosity won. When she drew the curtain aside, her breath caught. The lantern light was back, now resting on the shore directly outside her cottage. Someone had crossed the water. She rushed to the door, flung it open, and froze. The air smelled of wet earth and lake water. The lantern sat on the ground, burning faintly, but there was no one there. Only the marks of bare feet in the mud, leading towards the orchard behind her cottage. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. "Hello." The wind answered with a low sigh through the apple branches. She picked up the lantern, and for the briefest moment, the flame flared, showing the faint outline of a face reflected in the glass. It wasn't hers. The light died instantly. Eliza dropped the lantern and ran back inside, slamming the door shut. She pressed her back against it, every nerve alive with fear. In the flickering lamplight, she saw the notebook on her desk, its pages fluttering though the windows were closed. She approached it cautiously. The pages had turned themselves to the center. A new line had appeared, written in the same familiar, looping hand as before. "You left me behind." Rain began to lash against the glass, thunder rolling low over the lake. She stared at the words, unable to breathe. Then, from somewhere near the door, came a faint knock. 3 times, soft, deliberate, and unmistakably human. When she turned, the lantern she had dropped outside was burning again, its glow shining through the crack beneath the door. When Lily returned to the house on the hill the next morning, the air felt heavier, as if the place itself had been waiting for her. Mist clung to the fields, wrapping the windows in ghostly veils. She hesitated at the front door, hand trembling as she turned the brass handle. Inside, the house was still. The scent of old wood and roses lingered. But there was something else now, an undercurrent of damp earth, as if the garden had crept indoors during the night. The portrait of the little girl in the hallway seemed brighter somehow, the child's painted eyes almost glistening with tears. She wandered into the parlor and froze. The music box on the mantel, one she had never touched, was open. The tiny ballerina turned slowly, the tune a soft, haunting lullaby. Then came the whisper. Faint but clear. "Find me." Lily spun round. The room was empty. Yet the air stirred, and the faint scent of lavender drifted through the open doorway. She followed it down the corridor, heart pounding, until she reached the narrow door beneath the stairs. It creaked open on its own. A chill swept out, smelling of stone and forgotten things. She stepped inside, finding a short flight of steps leading down to what looked like a cellar. But as her eyes adjusted, she realized it wasn't just a storage room. There were drawings on the wall, childish sketches done in charcoal. A sun. A bird. A small house that looked exactly like the one she was standing in. And beneath them, written in a child's scrawl. "Don't let him find me." A sound came from the shadows behind her, soft footsteps, then a breath that wasn't her own. Lily turned, her candle flickering wildly. For a brief second, she thought she saw the shape of a small girl at the top of the steps, her white nightdress fluttering as if caught in a breeze that did not exist. Then the flame went out. The cellar door slammed shut, sealing Lily in darkness. The darkness pressed against Lily like a living thing. She fumbled for her matches, fingers shaking, and finally struck one. The tiny flame flared, revealing the cold stones around her and the rough wooden beams above. Her heart thundered. The cellar felt smaller than before, the walls closing in. She noticed a faint trail of scratches along the floorboards near the far wall, small, uneven, as though made by fingernails. Kneeling, she brushed away the dust, uncovering a loose plank. Something was hidden beneath. With trembling hands, she pried it open. A rush of cold air spilled out, carrying the faint scent of lavender again. Inside the narrow cavity lay a small wooden box, carved with the same sun and bird she had seen on the drawings. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single lock of hair, tied with a faded ribbon, and a silver locket. When she opened the locket, her breath caught. It contained 2 portraits painted so delicately they looked almost alive. One was the little girl from the portrait upstairs. The other was a man. A man Lily recognized. It was her father. Her hand flew to her mouth. The memory of her mother's funeral, her father's hollow expression, the years of silence, they all came crashing back. What connection did he have with this house? With this child? Before she could think further, the temperature dropped sharply. Her breath came out in white clouds. The candle flickered, then stretched unnaturally high, casting tall shadows on the wall. From the far corner of the room came the faint sound of crying. A small, broken sob. Lily turned, her voice quivering. "Who's there?" The crying stopped. Then came a whisper, trembling and close to her ear though no one stood near. "He hurt me." Lily stumbled backwards, clutching the locket. The shadows on the wall seemed to shift, taking on the shape of a man looming over a small child. A chill ran down her spine as the air pulsed with grief and rage. The whisper came again, louder this time, echoing off the walls. "He's still here." The candle exploded in a hiss of smoke. And from somewhere beneath the floorboards came the sound of slow, deliberate knocking, 3 times. Lily stood frozen in the darkness, clutching the locket against her chest. The air was still thick with smoke, and the faint scent of lavender lingered, mingling with the dampness of the cellar. She forced herself to breathe, counting slowly until her heartbeat steadied. When she climbed the creaking stairs back into the kitchen, dawn was breaking. Pale light filtered through the window, illuminating the worn tiles and a kettle left cold on the stove. The world above felt almost unreal after what she had just witnessed below. At the table, she opened the locket again. The man's face stared back at her, sharp jaw, dark eyes, the same look her father had in the old photographs at home. Beneath the tiny portrait, etched faintly in silver, was a name. Thomas Ellison. Her father's name. Lily's throat tightened. She remembered the rare occasions he spoke of Somerset, how he always changed the subject when she asked about his childhood. He used to say, "Some things are better left in the ground." But now she realized, he hadn't been speaking figuratively. A sudden movement outside caught her attention. Through the window, she saw an old woman standing among the apple trees. Her grey hair was loose, her posture frail, but her expression unmistakable. It was Mrs. Whitlow, the neighbor who had welcomed her on the first day. Lily hurried outside. The morning air bit against her skin. "Mrs. Whitlow," she called. "I need to ask you something, about the Ellisons." The old woman turned slowly, her eyes distant. "You shouldn't dig into what's buried, my dear," she said softly. "It only brings sorrow back." Lily took a step closer, showing her the locket. "Please. You must tell me who this child was." Mrs. Whitlow's expression changed. Her lips trembled, and her gaze dropped to the locket as though seeing a ghost. "I haven't seen that in 50 years, she whispered. She was called Clara. Clara Ellison. Ellison. Lily's heart pounded. Then she was your father's sister, Mrs. Whitlow finished quietly. She disappeared in that orchard when she was 7 years old. Some said she wandered off and fell into the river. Others believed she was taken. Lily stared at her, cold spreading through her veins. Taken by whom? Mrs. Whitlow's voice dropped to a whisper. By the man who built this house. A gust of wind swept through the orchard, rustling the branches. The apples shook loose, thudding softly against the earth. Mrs. Whitlow's eyes met hers once more. Your father tried to stop him. But he was only a boy. The guilt followed him all his life. Lily felt her breath leave her body. Her father's nightmares, the way he'd avoided the countryside, the way he'd burned old letters in the garden, it all made sense now. But before she could ask more, Mrs. Whitlow's gaze drifted past Lily's shoulder. Oh dear, she murmured, backing away. She's watching you now. Lily turned sharply. Between the apple trees, a figure in a faded blue dress stood perfectly still. The figure in the blue dress did not move. Morning light filtered through the apple branches, scattering patches of gold across the orchard. Yet the woman's outline seemed untouched by it, her presence dimming the air around her like a shadow carved into daylight. Lily's breath trembled. Who are you? She whispered. The woman tilted her head slightly. Her hair, pale and long, drifted with the breeze though the rest of her remained perfectly still. Then, in a voice so soft it seemed to rise from the ground itself, she spoke. Tell him. I forgive him. Lily blinked. Tell who? But the figure had already begun to fade, the folds of her blue gown dissolving into the mist between the trees. Within seconds, she was gone. Mrs. Whitlow's lips moved soundlessly, crossing herself with a trembling hand. She only appears when the truth is near, she murmured, and turned away, hobbling towards the lane. Lily stood alone among the falling leaves, the locket still warm in her palm. Tell him I forgive him. The words echoed in her mind. But her father was gone, dead and buried for nearly a decade. She returned inside, locking the door behind her. The house felt different now, heavier somehow, as if listening. Dust motes drifted through the morning light, spinning slowly like faint memories. Drawn by something she could not explain, Lily went to the parlor. On the mantelpiece stood an old clock that had never worked since her arrival. Now, inexplicably, it ticked. Each second landed like a heartbeat against the silence. Beside it, half buried beneath yellowed letters, she noticed a photograph she hadn't seen before. It showed a man standing proudly in front of the orchard, stern, broad-shouldered, his hand resting on the shoulder of a little girl with plaited hair. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words, Thomas Ellison and Clara, Orchard Vale, 1967. Her stomach twisted. She turned the photograph over again and stared at the man's face. It wasn't her father. It was the same man from the shadows on the cellar wall. The builder. The real Thomas Ellison. Then who was her father? Lily staggered back, the photograph trembling in her hands. From upstairs came a slow, dragging sound, like something heavy being moved across the floor. She froze, eyes lifting towards the ceiling. A pause. Then another sound, footsteps. They moved towards the staircase. She backed away, every nerve on edge. The floorboards creaked once, then twice. The clock on the mantelpiece stopped. A whisper came from the landing above, the same voice she had heard in the cellar. He's still in the house. Lily turned to run, but before she reached the door, the front hall mirror clouded over as though breath had touched its surface. Words began to form slowly across the glass, written from the inside. The message on the mirror faded, but its chill lingered in the air. Beneath the hearth. Lily stared at the words until the condensation vanished completely, leaving only her reflection, pale, trembling, and no longer certain if she was alone. The old parlor was silent now, except for the faint hum of wind pressing against the windows. The clock had stopped once more, its hands frozen at exactly 3 minutes past 6. Lily turned towards the fireplace, where the ashes from the previous night still lay cold and grey. Her father's voice seemed to whisper in memory, "Some things are better left in the ground." But the truth was already clawing its way out. She found the iron poker and began scraping at the soot. Beneath the ashes, the stone floor felt uneven, as if something solid hid beneath it. She pried at the edges until one slab lifted slightly with a groan. A stale gust of air seeped out, carrying a faint sweetness that turned her stomach. Heart pounding, she pulled the slab aside. A small space opened below, a shallow pit lined with earth and crumbled brick. Within it lay a bundle wrapped in rotting cloth. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, unwrapping the folds layer by layer until pale bone gleamed beneath. A child's skeleton. And clutched between its fragile ribs was a small silver hairpin shaped like a bird. The same bird carved on the wooden box. Lily stumbled backwards, tears burning her eyes. The air grew heavier, almost suffocating. She heard faint footsteps again, but this time they circled her, small, light, purposeful. Then, a voice, clearer now, younger. "He said he'd keep me safe." Lily looked around wildly. "Clara." The candle flame flickered blue. A faint outline shimmered before her, the little girl with plaited hair, her eyes deep as the orchard shadows. "You're his daughter," Clara whispered. "He wasn't the one who built the house." He tried to stop him, but he was too late. The truth struck like a cold wave. Lily saw it all, her father as a frightened boy, hiding in the cellar, hearing screams through the floorboards, unable to save his sister. The guilt that haunted him forever. Clara looked towards the hearth. "He buried me here to protect me from him." But the house remembered. Lily knelt, tears falling silently. "You can rest now. He's gone. You're safe." The girl smiled faintly, the edges of her form softening. "Thank you." A sudden warmth filled the room, gentle as sunlight through blossom. The scent of lavender drifted once more, wrapping Lily in calm. The shadows retreated, and the air felt clean, as though the house had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. When Lily looked again, the child was gone. Only the locket lay on the hearth, its silver polished bright as if freshly made. She picked it up, holding it close. The portrait inside had changed, now showing Clara alone, her eyes peaceful, her smile serene. Outside, the wind had quietened. The orchard shimmered in morning light, and for the first time since her arrival, Orchard Vale felt alive, not haunted. As Lily stepped out into the garden, petals fell softly from the apple trees, and from somewhere unseen came the faint laughter of a child, free at last.